Doing it. Hey there, welcome. I'm so happy to have you, Reed Davis, on the Empower Nutrition podcast. How are you?
Fantastic, Erin. It's so good to be here with you and your guests, your audience.
Same. I was delighted to have this chance to interview you. Functional lab testing is one of my top passions and something that has really just changed the course of my career in healthcare. And so I'm just looking forward to picking your brain on this topic.
Well, you pick what's left of it.
All right. Yeah, no, I feel that way too. Well, tell me a little bit about, so you really center on these specialty labs. First of all, maybe you can kind of frame for us what's the difference between like functional lab testing and what does that even mean? What's the difference between that, maybe labs that you might get ordered from like your primary care on an annual basis?
Sure. Well, there blood work screenings that practitioners do. If you go to your primary care guy, he's probably going to run a standard CBC Kim panel and get back to you with nothing's wrong. That's the most common complaint I hear from our clients, and everybody is, they don't feel well. They go to the doctor, and the doctor says their blood work looks normal because it's really looking for disease. It's looking for something that's way out of range that might be a concern. And those tests aren't known for zeroing in on what I call healing opportunities. So functional lab work, and we use saliva testing, urine testing, stool testing, some blood work, and we're looking for what is out of whack that needs improvement, not necessarily what's a diagnosable disease. So there's all those diagnostic tests that are looking for disease. They might see something, a positive or negative on a certain marker, but we're looking for nuances, to really just healing opportunities. So it's a whole different way of looking at things.
Yeah. I love that. And what do you think it is about? What is it about? Maybe tell me a little bit more about your journey of how did you come to specialize in training people, practitioners, and
Oh,
people in
thanks.
functional testing?
I really appreciate that opportunity because was so exciting. In the late 90s, I was actually in environmental law, and I was working with the planet, saving the air, birds, water, trees, bees, and I loved
Well,
doing that. But I started turning my attention to people. And so I started talking a lot with my son's chiropractor in the turn of the century. He was a great athlete, um, and I was talking to her all the time about health and wellness, and I decided to change careers and work with people.
wow.
Again, I knew how bad the environment was. I saw the damage being done, and I started wondering, what about us, including me?
Yeah.
And I had never really been to the doctor except for sports injuries, a couple motorcycle spills. But
Yeah.
I quickly learned when I started working in that clinic, so it was a wellness center.
Mm-hmm.
I quickly learned that people were really struggling with their health, and they weren't
Yeah.
getting the answers that they needed from standard medicine, the standard blood work, so to say. Again, they've been told nothing's wrong with you, and yet they knew. And so they start going around and looking for alternatives, and walked into our place. We're an alternative, chiropractic, acupuncture, functional type of place. So, and I was studying at the time. I went straight into studying nutrition, personal fitness, myofascial therapy, and all these different modalities and things. So I worked very, very hard for 10 years running thousands of labs. Thank God those labs are available to me. And
Yeah.
now I teach a course that makes them available to everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. Tell me about, I guess one thing that's a little bit controversial around like this type of testing is that there's I have actually seen this where there are practitioners who just rely a little bit too heavily on like using a supplement based only approach to these labs. So the kind of like
Hmm.
stereotypical problem with functional medicine is like you pay a fortune to see this cash paid doctor. They charge you $4,000 for these fancy labs, and then all you get is like $1,000 supplement bill, and you're taking 20 pills a day. Tell
Yeah,
me about that problem and like
that's
what you think.
yeah, I'd be happy
Yeah.
to, Erin, because that's very unfortunate. And
Yeah.
so, first of all, I have to say I'm not a physician. And
Mm.
so, while I had a lot to learn when I started running labs, I had
Mhm.
nothing to unlearn. So I was able to take a very fresh approach to what am I looking for in these labs, and I learned to identify healing opportunities. Now that's not the same as a diagnosis, and that is unfortunately why functional medicine practitioners haven't advanced as far as they'd like to, and
Mhm.
they want to, but they're bound by the same rules and regulations and licensure and boards and standard of care and all of that. The regular doctors, they have the same rules. So they have to play by those rules. They must
Mhm.
diagnose in order to treat. Now, it's good that they treat with supplements instead of drugs, let's say. I mean, at least that's one point you could say is in their favor if you lean towards the natural way. But it requires so much more than just supplements. Supplements to replace drugs is still the same mentality. Take this
Right.
for that, take this for that. And you might
Mhm.
relieve some symptoms, although supplements take a lot longer because they're not as powerful. And they have mostly an accumulative effect.
Mhm.
So that's what's wrong with functional medicine, in my opinion. I mean, you dialed it. I didn't think we would start there. Thought we might end there.
Oh, we just go straight in around here. We just go for it.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, so that was, actually when I first started, I was taking these nutrition classes, and they were doing the same thing. Take this for that. So people were coming in the clinic, and they had certain complaints, and I would have them fill out some questionnaires and try these supplements. This is while I was learning to do the lab work. And guess what? It worked a little bit, but people
Mhm.
quit doing it after just a short period of time, maybe 6 weeks or 8 weeks. If it worked, if the supplements helped, they'd say, "Oh, I'm better now," and quit taking them, or
Mhm.
they didn't work and they'd say, and they would quit taking them. So either way, they quit taking the stuff.
Yeah. That's funny.
So yeah, so it took me years and years to figure out what to do at home. I knew in the beginning,
Mhm.
Mrs. Smith, it's not coming in the office. You're doing great. You're coming in and you're getting your chiropractic or your acupuncture and different modalities and things. But it's what you do at home that matters. It's what you
Mhm.
do at home that matters. So I became really focused on what can people do at home in entire lives. They're in complete holistic, if you will. That means everything, your whole life.
Mhm.
And really, the term is epigenetics.
Mhm.
You have your genes and you can't change them because you can't pick your parents.
Yeah.
But you can't pick your parents, but you can pick everything else going on in your life. That's so you have your genes, genetics, and epigenetics is what affects the genes, what makes the
Sure.
genes do what they do. And
Okay.
so we can control that. So I had to come up with a complete epigenetic program that includes diet and rest and exercise and stress reduction and finally supplements. By the way, that
Mhm.
spells DRESS, dress. Diet,
Mhm.
rest, exercise, stress reduction supplements. It makes it very easy to remember, and
Mhm.
almost everything you could do will squeeze into there somewhere.
Sure. Absolutely. Use a similar approach, and I think that like true functional medicine also does. So I think I don't know if you agree with this, but what I'm not trying to say is that functional medicine is fundamentally flawed. I think it's what you said of that mindset that is taken from like a conventional setting of just diagnose a problem, find a bottle of pills that can best address that one specific thing and like move on. That sort of like band-aid approach is kind of like getting out of that mindset is important. So like in functional medicine, all those things are pillars of like the stress, the exercise, the rest and everything. But what I find is that those are harder things to get people to do. It's easier
Mm-hmm.
to get people to buy a bottle of supplement pills than it is to get people to like act change lifestyles. What are some of the things that you
Yeah.
find to be the most effective at helping people to actually make those lifestyle changes?
Well, two things. One is the lab test results themselves, because
Mhm.
the way we interpret those again isn't to diagnose or treat one thing. We
Mhm.
find the diagnosis and treatment model is too narrowly focused on one thing, one part, one problem, one fix. Doctors love to
Mhm.
diagnose hypothyroidism or irritable bowel or something. And that's not a bad thing by itself. But the minute
Mhm.
a doctor lays down a diagnosis, they're likely forgetting about or ignoring multiple other things that person needs to pay attention to. And they get real focused on the lab results themselves, and they start
Yeah.
kind of treating the paper. Take this,
Yeah.
let's get those numbers in shape instead
Mhm.
of getting that entire person in shape. And
Sure.
so the lab results, the way we go over them, is very motivating. Is when you tell people show them on the paper why you feel so lousy. This is your adrenals. This is your thyroid. This is your sex hormones. This is your immune system. Here's your digestion, not working so well. Here's your detoxification liver function and things. So when you show people what the healing opportunities are, say, look, all these things can be improved. And then
Mhm.
they ask, well, how? Because they're excited and they're interested, and you're the first person after you showed them why they feel so lousy. Other
Yeah.
practitioners just, here's your diagnosis, here's your pills, and
Mhm.
so they're very excited to know what's wrong. So now they're more motivated to fix it. So that's one thing. Lab results properly interpreted, answering why you feel so lousy, and then the person is hungry for what can I do? What can I do besides take pills? And so they have to take a look at then the protocol, the diet,
Mhm.
the rest, the exercise, the stress reduction, and the supplementation. That can all be highly individualized. So it's just for
Mhm.
you. You know, I always say this is your protocol. This is not for your husband. This is not for your kids. This is not for your neighbor. This is for you because it's based on all the history we took, and then of course
Mhm.
the lab work. Now the other thing, to answer your question, that's so motivating is the fact that we're really going into a self empowerment, as I said, and we coach them. So it isn't like going to a doctor where
Mhm.
you get told, uh, here's your diagnosis, here's your pills, come back in 3 months, and we'll see what the paper looks like. We'll see if we've effected changes on the paper. Again, I call it treating the test results. We say, look, here's all your test results. Here's all the healing opportunities. Here's all the things that you can do that you have control over your life. And it's not come back in 3 months. It's let's work together for 3 months because we include health coaching. And so the health coaching aspect of what we do, I think, is huge. And doctors are starting to
Mhm.
hire health coaches. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
they're just using them to get people to take their medication more compliantly instead of all of
Mhm.
the lifestyle factors. How to eat, how to shop, how to prepare your meals in an organized way for yourself and your whole family. So there's all kinds of coaching on things like that. Other lifestyle coaching, like on getting a good night's sleep. What's good sleep hygiene? How can I sleep more soundly, more through the night? That can require
Mhm.
some coaching. Um, the exercise, of course, there's personal trainers. Everyone knows about that. Lots of people can help you. And then the stress reduction is big. We can help with not just the chemical stressors, the environmental stressors. We can identify some of those through the lab work, and you can eliminate them. But there's other types of stress. Mental, emotional stress can be very confounding to a program. And so health coaches are trained in positive psychology and setting goals and helping you reach them in a lot of ways. So the answer to your question is the lab work itself is very revealing. It's very motivating. But then the fact that we use coaches, we work with you for say a minimum 90 days. Be surprised what you can do in 90 days if you are really working on it. It's not come back in 90 days and we'll
Yeah.
retest you.
Yeah. So is that what you typically recommend? Is that the labs are rechecked at like the 3 month point?
No, you don't have to respend all that money. I mean, we do ask people to, first of all, run more than one lab. It's not just let's look at your last blood
Mhm.
work. That'd be like who cares what you have for lunch yesterday? It doesn't really matter. Let's look at these hormones and the immune system and digestion and detoxification, a whole healing constellation, a whole constellation of opportunities for improvement. And when you look at them together, you're able to connect the dots. So it isn't just one thing. Oh, your thyroid's low. Let's treat that. No, it's the way it works is stress creates imbalance and your body starts breaking down. You get cortisol and DHEA, you're out of balance. You get the sex hormones that are out of balance. Then it cascades, it hits the immune system up. If you're stressed out, your immune system goes down. Now you have a
Yeah.
dysbiosis, you have maldigestion, malabsorption, and the dysbiosis. And then bigger bugs can come along, overgrowth, bacteria and fungus and even parasites and things like that. Well, now you've got hyperpermeability, leaky gut, and now you've got things going into the liver that are causing it to be congested and not work, not detoxify. So there's this
Hmm.
entire cascade. So you have to have all the numbers. To me,
Yeah.
we can't run one test and it doesn't work. So you're going to invest in that. But no, you don't have to retest it every 90 days or something. Might be one test you redo or two. Might be that we
Hmm.
introduce actually a new test. We're going to start to maybe uh, go down a little bit into function. I won't say get into the weeds, but dig a little deeper sometimes.
Hmm.
Because remember, it's not about take this for that. Here's the test, positive or negative, and or take this for that. Um, it's here's this constellation healing opportunities. Here's all the things we're going to work together on for 90 days, and then we'll um, correct course. You're always correcting course. There's no power boating to health. It's like sailing. There's changing direction here and there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's fascinating to hear the way you describe that cascade because that's exactly the way that I believe it's happening for most people as well, even who come with something as benign as like I'm struggling to lose weight or I'm struggling with my weight. We know that when you have that dysbiosis that you talked about that then causes that systemic inflammation, then that metabolic endotoxemia causes weight gain and insulin resistance. It causes more gain and weight loss resistance, and that sequence I find to be incredibly accurate. So I'm curious what you think about testing along that whole cascade, because I wonder if it's in that scenario important in your mind to even do gut testing, or do you start with the adrenal and like sex hormone testing, because that's really where the beginning of the story is, or the timeline that you described. But what do you think on that?
Well, I was trained that way, and then over 10,000 clients, yeah, I
Hmm.
refined it a bit. But it's said very often, especially in functional medicine, all disease begins in the gut. Well, no, but it circles around to it frequently enough.
Yeah.
It usually circles around to it. But stress comes in all these different forms. It just being a human today is stressful. It's just the world we live in is
Yeah.
kind of got a lot of pressure on your mental emotional health, upon your physical health. In terms of me personally, I have a very well used body. I have a lot of sports and even work when I used to do construction and things when I was younger, and accidents and things like that. So we get hurt, along the way. So you got mental emotional stress. You've got aches and pains and unhealed things around your body that are very stressful. And then, of course, there's back to the environment. It's really polluted. I mean, it doesn't. I'm
Mhm.
not an alarmist, but if there's something to be alarmed about, it would be maybe the 80,000 plus chemicals that are in the environment, that are in our food,
Yeah.
water, air. They're everywhere. They're ubiquitous, and they're even in our clothing. They're in our household cleaning products, personal care products. They exude. They outgas from new furniture or carpeting. It's just really amazing. Not to mention the biochemical stress that
Right.
comes from our own bodies. We produce toxins and waste, on a cellular level. And so if that's not properly being sequestered or eliminated, really both, then guess what? You've got an environment that's not conducive to health, and it will, depending on your genetics and how much you work towards mitigating it, it can really run you down. I mean, look at the number of people getting cancer and heart disease and you name it. Now Alzheimer's and all these things. When I first started it, when everybody had fibromyalgia, you know,
Yeah.
you know, and so, but so the environment hasn't improved any. Um, it's really just only getting worse. So it's
Yeah.
us against that, and there's ways to sort it out and live a better, healthier life. That's what we're all about, right?
Absolutely. And it does freak me out to think about the environmental situation that we're in. And so it's encouraging to hear your optimism around our ability to defend ourselves to some degree. And I know there's kind of a lot to that. So maybe before we get into that, would you be willing to share with me what sort of like the basic workup that you might recommend for an
Yeah,
initial
sure.
client?
So I use the acronym HIDDEN, HIDDEN,
Hmm.
for hormones, immune, digestion, detoxification, energy production, and nervous system balance. HIDDEN. It sounds like a mouthful, and actually, there are multiple labs and questionnaires that need to be done, and that's how we get our data. You could
Hmm.
consider it intelligence gathering. So if
Hmm.
someone comes to me and they say, "Hey, I've been to 10 doctors already and no one's helped me. Can you help me?" And
Hmm.
I have to say, "I don't know."
That's a good
I need
answer.
to first of all, I need to first interview you and
Yeah.
see if you're helpable. Are you a person that's open, and would you be willing to invest in the labs and the rigor, the robustness, the comprehensiveness of what I need to know? Because remember, nothing else has worked for you. You've been to all these practitioners. Very likely they're fractionating to some degree. They're reducing down. One's a gastroenterologist. He's going to look at for certain things. The endocrinologist, they're going to look for certain things. You name the specialist, and they'll
Yeah.
pass you around from one to the other.
Yeah.
So when this is how it happened, Erin, if I could just tell you, when I first started, I realized that everybody had been to 6, 8, 10 or more practitioners and hadn't been helped. And I thought it was a big ripoff, number one. I just thought, well, what a ripoff. And remember, I said I had a lot to learn, but I had nothing to unlearn. And so it was just purely from a health detective point of view, what to figure out what's going wrong. And I called it the cycle of trial and error.
Mm.
The other thing, and I was out riding my motorcycle one day, and I thought of, boy, this sucks for them. I said, I'm going to be the last person they need to see. I'm not a specialist in any one area, except for maybe this comprehensive lab approach and teaching. Now I teach this approach, but so you've got to be able to identify um, multiple healing opportunities. You can't just specialize in one thing and pass them on to the next person. That's
Yeah.
what sucks. It's again. I figure it's a ripoff, and I'm going to be the one who stops it. Now that was dreaming at the time, back in the late '90s, 1999, 2000. Um, again, I didn't know what I was doing, but I had a certain approach and uh, sort of veracity, and desire, and I really wanted to help people, and I made that my life, made that my
Yeah.
life's work. I'm going to be the last person.
I
So
love
I couldn't,
that.
I,
Swagger.
so now that's what we teach is this comprehensive look at least the basics. So the answer to your question is HIDDEN. We run a hormone saliva test, looks at the
Mhm.
catabolic, anabolic, plus all the sex hormones. And by the way, we could also look at secretory IgA, which is your immune system, and melatonin. which points the finger in a couple different areas, all on one simple saliva test. That's a lot of data, but it's still not enough. So when all of that's breaking down and disorganized, you end up with metabolic chaos. That's another term that I love, and I replaced the word root cause with metabolic chaos, because there's always this downward spiral. There's always this cascade. And again, I'm trying to get to the answer to your question. So the cascade affects those hormones, and then your immune system goes out of whack. So we have to look at that. And then digestion gets diminished because you're not breaking down and absorbing nutrients properly. If you don't have all the right bacteria, a good flora balance, if you're dysbiotic, we call it,
Yeah.
well, guess what? You're going to have those problems. Now, there's a whole cascade associated with that, but physically, and what we measure and what we look towards improving is gut integrity. You end up with a lot of immune complexes and antigens, and you get leaky gut. So now you've
Yeah.
got your sex hormones are out of balance, your catabolic anabolic is out of balance, your body's breaking down, your immune system starts to go down, then you end up with dysbiosis.
Yep.
Now that just gets worse, and it eventually opens up leaky, the tight junctions in the gut. Now you've
Mhm.
got things flowing through into the liver,
Yeah.
congesting the liver. Well, now you've got a detoxification problem, because the
Mhm.
liver is your granddaddy detoxification organ, and it works in concert with the lymph and with the kidneys and with
Mhm.
even your skin and the colon, and even your lungs are detoxifying organs. They exchange good gas for bad
Right.
gas for good gas. So you've got a lot going on there, and that's just the hormone immune digestion detoxification. Now the in hidden is energy production. On a cellular level, you got to get the right fuel mixture into those cells to be burned as fuel. And then those cells will do their job. I bet if I asked anyone listening to this, do you think you have to train your cells what their job is? They would say, no, you don't have to train your cells what their job is. There's an innate intelligence uh, connected, and they know what they just need to be fueled properly. So energy production on a cellular level so that it can do its job is really critical. So we have a way of looking at that. And then of course the last one is nervous system. I mean, there's other things you can look at, oxidative stress or whatever, but hormone immune digestion, detoxification, energy production, and then the nervous system balance. You want to be balanced between sympathetic and parasympathetic. If you're overly one way or the other, you're out of balance. And we all know what being overly sympathetic dominant is. You have anxiety. People are running around like chickens with their heads cut off. Just they're just overly sympathetic. That means fight flight. Sympathetic is the fight flight. No, believe it or not, you can actually be overly parasympathetic. That's the opposite. That's your rest and digest, known as feed and breathe sometimes. If you're overly parasympathetic, you seem lazy and unmotivated and you can't get your ass off the sofa kind of a thing. You're just in that sympathetic, or pardon me, parasympathetic overload, and you're not going to accomplish much in life. So you need balance. You need to strengthen the weaker side in either case. And so that
Yeah.
HIDDEN is our basics. That's what we have people invest in their uh, money in the lab work. We use that data, it's intelligence gathering, and apply it to one individual. You know, these labs belong to one person, you, not everyone else, just you. And then the protocol becomes really simple. It flows from there. What to eat, time to go to bed and get up, how to get a good night's sleep, and all the exercise and stress reduction is huge. And of course, the supplementation kicks in. I was happy to talk about that too. But that's the hidden. That's
Yeah.
my answers your question about where do you look.
Okay. So it sounds like the 4-point cortisol, and then a lot of what you're describing you can look at that with an organic acids test. Is that something that you also include?
There are some organic acids, the 8-OHTG, for instance. For we do some dried urine testing, but we're looking at other elements too from that same test. The indican, for instance, tells us if
Yeah.
you have a dysbiosis. That's an old-fashioned test. Doctors used to run it in their office. They got
Mhm.
away from some of these it like functional labs. 40 years ago, they quit doing it,
Yeah.
and I don't know
Yeah.
why. But yeah, indican um, lipid peroxides are important. They can tell you if a liver's congested. Um,
Mhm.
or if there's cellular membrane damage. The urinary bile acids is a good one. So you, again, back to urine, the bile acids, um, and the 8-OHTG for oxidative stress and things. And
Mhm.
there's others. That's not something I teach in my basic course. We have an
Okay.
advanced course in the oats, organic
Okay.
acids.
Okay, and then, I know you also teach a little bit about food sensitivities. Do you wanna talk a little bit about, like, is this a
Love it.
thing? What's the scene? Do you have
Yeah,
any
I could
thoughts?
tell you
Yeah.
so many different stories, Erin, of people coming in who I had a lady, for instance, with um, she was getting chiropractic in her office, and she was on about her eighth visit, and I could see she was sad one day, like different. I said, "Hey,
Mhm.
what's going on?" She goes, "Oh, it's this weight. I'm just so frustrated. I'm 40 pounds overweight, and it's so frustrating, and I just hate it." And I said, "Well, what are we going to do about?" There's nothing we could do. She was upset. There's nothing we can do. I'm on this medication for the hives. She gets these patches, hives on her whole body. She said, and I have to take this medication for the hives, and it makes me fat. And before I could say anything else, she goes, "And I was at the doctor," she told me, "just recently for a checkup." And she told him how frustrated she was with the weight from the medication for the hives. And he said to her, according to her, "Lady, you can be fat or you can have the hives."
Oh.
And yeah, and she said, "Well, that's depressing, doctor." And he said, "Well, I can write you a prescription for antidepressants if you want." So so when I said to her, "Well, why didn't you ever try to find out why you get the hives?" Her head just about spun off her shoulders. And what do you mean? I said, "Yeah, run a test, find out why you get the hives." And we did that. Long story short, she'd been on those meds for 2 years and hadn't had a hot shower or worked out to a perspiration, even on the meds, because she would still get the hives, sweating or hot showers. So within 9 days after giving her her test results, we ran some food sensitivity tests, was my point. We ran other tests, but that food sensitivity test identified some things she was eating every day. And when she quit, within 9 days, her hives were gone. She got off her medication. And within another week, she was working out to a sweat and taking hot showers and losing weight because
Mm.
the medication was what made her fat, not the hives. The hives were caused by something else. So all she was doing was treating her symptoms. And so when you asked about food sensitivity testing, I could, looking backwards, could tell you that I would never not run that test. I don't. Looking forwards, I don't know who is going to help the most. Depends on the number of food sensitivities, how often you eat it, and it depends how much that's contributing to metabolic chaos in your body. But oh my God, I'd never leave that test out because looking backwards at that lady, kids that it ended their asthma, it ended their ADD, ADHD kind of a thing. Migraine headaches gone away. Again, looking forward, there's no guarantees, but looking backwards, thank God we have that test and ran that MRT test. I know that's the one you like too, right?
Yeah, I do use the MRT test, and I'm glad you brought that up because I think what we need to be careful about is like, um, I'd like to hear your opinion on this, but what I worry about is that I think some people get really excited about the idea of having these like amazing health turnarounds, like you're describing, from a food sensitivity test. So they end up buying like a test off of their Instagram ads, or like walking through CVS, they see it sitting there on a shelf. What would you say
Yeah.
about these types of tests that are like typically like some type of IgG based tests that people can just order direct?
I haven't seen any order direct labs that are as effective or even
Mhm.
close to the MRT, which you have to get through a practitioner. Um, and and matter of fact, some of them are kind of useless, you know. And there's also other types of food testing, nutrients and nutrient deficiencies and things like that. Um, we have other ways of determining what the right diet is for you, but as far as the food sensitivities, they're really oral intolerances. And so there's different ways to look at that. The immunoglobulin tests, I don't think are as well or as good, except for maybe the IgE, but you already would know what those foods are. You know, IgE testing is like true allergies, and you would know if you had a
Yeah.
true allergy. So that would be if you ate something, probably 20 minutes later, you've got the blotches on your skin, or you've got your eyes watering, or you're sneezing, or you got a migraine, or you know whatever the symptom's going to be. You would
Hmm.
know if it was an IgE sensitive uh, type reaction. But these other ones are very subtle. You know, you can't put two and two together, like because it could be a very delayed response, or it could be
Hmm.
an accumulative response. You might have had migraines for 10 years, and you
Hmm.
can't put two and two together. That, oh, when I eat this food, I get a migraine. You it's in your system, and it's a symptom you're getting. And you could even go on an elimination diet, and if you didn't eliminate that exact food, you could still have your migraines and say, oh, well, elimination diets don't work.
Hmm. Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit about the difference between like what's the difference between the MRT test and like an IgG or an IgG/IgA test?
Sure. The mediated release test, the MRT that we've been talking about, looks at uh, your blood, and as the white blood cells release chemicals, the volume of blood shrinks. So you actually are measuring, you're gradiating the reaction that that food causes.
Mm.
Um, and you have a really good view there of inflammation, basically, that this causes inflammation, white blood cells. So you're going to eliminate those foods, and probably within a very short period of time. The minimum is about 3 weeks. You should feel damn better. And I've seen people's migraines or ADD or asthma go away. I had a kid who we ran that test on, the MRT test on, and and he changed completely. He was being told to that he had to go home or go on Ritalin by his teachers and principal, not even doctors. They're telling the mom, "You got to put your kid on Ritalin." And that was the drug of choice back then, or he can't come back to school. And she
Mm.
asked me what to, you know. So we ran this test. We ran a couple others, but that's the test that identified what he was eating. That within 3 weeks, the principal tracked me down through the mom and says, you know, this boy's a completely different boy, but he wanted to know what you put him on, like as if we put him on some kind of magic pill or something. I
Mm.
told him, you know, we put him on a good diet, we put him on a good sleep regimen, and some other things. And anyway, I'm just saying, with that test, we've turned lives around.
Yeah, I mean, I think that a big important thing about it that I make sure to explain to people is that with that, you're measuring the actual reaction of the cells. The cells are actually changing volume when they react, as compared to when they don't react, they don't change volume. So something actually has happened. The cell has actually responded to that food chemical. Whereas with these antibody tests, that's just a potential to react, and you're not sure if that reaction would actually happen when the food was consumed or not. And in fact, the immune system is, I think, a little more complex than people give it credit for. Just because you have the memory of a food doesn't mean you would always react to food. Maybe you're remembering it so that you can remember to not react. And that's actually the way the IgG works.
It's much more hit or miss with the
Yeah.
IgG. Um, which is not our first line at all of testing.
Yeah. Awesome. So, sounds like MRT, food sensitivity testing, saliva, adrenal testing. What are some of the other big top things that you
Well, the
recommend them
dried
to take?
urine test, we call it the metabolic wellness
Mm,
assessment. So that looks at the urinary bile acids, which is whether your liver's congested or not.
mm,
And it looks at 808, 808DG, which is
yeah.
your an oxidative stress marker,
Mm,
8 hydroxydeoxyguanosine. Uh, and so then it also looks at that indican, which is a marker for dysbiosis, and poor protein breakdown. And so that is a window into your immune system. So we look at the immune system, look at oxidative stress, and we look at liver congestion, all with one simple urine test. It's quite remarkable. We're adding some markers to that, by the way. Um, I work very closely with a developing a lab that develops labs, and that's what we use. So then we also use the mucosal barrier assessment,
mm,
which is a finger stick test. So all these can be done at home. The saliva test for the adrenals and your sex hormones, which looks at SIGA and melatonin too. That's saliva done at home, easy. The urine test I just described, metabolic wellness panel, urine at home, easy. The other one's a finger stick. So it's at home. It's not as easy. You got to drip some blood out on a blotter and let it dry and send it in. But it gives us zonulin and then your histamine and DAO, which is diamine oxidase, and the ratio between histamine and diamine oxidase. It's a really good test for the lining of the gut, what kind of condition that's in, and of course leaky gut. The zonulin is a measurement for hyperpermeability.
mhm.
That tells you a lot about a person, a lot about what they need to do to heal, how long that healing might take, all kinds of things. And it's along with the food sensitivity testing, and then of course the stool testing for pathogens and dysbiosis and overgrowth and uh, viruses and funguses and all kinds of things. And it's got some functional markers on it too. So those five labs are critical, and I wouldn't
Yeah.
see somebody without running all of them.
Yeah. I also put the functional stool test as um, top order priority. And I'm curious what you have to say about. So, one challenge I find is that even though it may have started with with stress and that then impacts adrenal hormones, that impacts the immune system, that then allows overgrowth of negative bacteria, causing the intestinal permeability, da da da. When I find that once you have these overgrowth problems, dysbiosis in the gut, it's very difficult to change that with lifestyle changes alone. So maybe tell me a little bit about your approach that you recommend when somebody does have these overgrown
Yeah,
dysbiotic bacteria and maybe fungal overgrowth. What do you
that's a great
recommend around that?
question.
Yeah.
Right. So our protocol is DRESS: diet, rest, exercise, stress reduction, and supplements. And in supplements, there's some areas there where you're actually self-treating. Like if you're using certain antimicrobials or anti-parasitic, anti um, bacteria, whatever it might be, those aren't really supplements because there's no such thing as a, let's say, artemisia deficiency.
Yeah, yeah,
But
you're not supplementing
yes,
that.
you're not really supplementing because it's not a required nutrient. You're actually self-treating, and so
Mm,
that's an option for people. If someone has a bad overgrowth, I always refer them to a physician. Hey, you can go get this checked out, um,
mm,
and that physician probably going to write a prescription, which a lot of people don't like. They don't like the scorched earth policy, involved in that. So they want to know, can they treat it themselves? And of course, there's things that have been used for thousands of years that are very good at getting rid of bacteria and especially parasites and these kind of things. fungal treatment. Some of those can be very insidious too and very long lasting. So it's always good to get some medical oversight. But you can use, there's lots of self treatment for those kind of things. What do you think about that?
I definitely agree with you. I mean, I think that I've seen people really get themselves into trying to Google around online and find their own protocols. And so um, we, I definitely think it's important to get with like a licensed, experienced person if you're going to be doing like herbal antimicrobials or antifungals or like parasitic things, and not trying to just do it yourself because it's very nuanced.
I agree
And like
with
you said,
you.
it is
Yeah.
effective, but it can
Hmm.
be, it's tricky. I think it's just that's an area of expertise that warrants a trained person taking care of it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it depends kind of on the bugs too, because you want it, and that's why the lab work I think is pretty important. But
Mm.
my mom, I'm a pretty old guy, and I grew up. My mom would treat us if she thought we had a parasite or something like you got the itchy bum thing going on. She'd treat us. My mom would sort of deworm us just like we dewormed our dog. It's not uncommon, and in some cultures, that's what you do. There's known um, um, self-administered remedies for a lot of these things. Nowadays, we grow up in a different world. There's liabilities and there's weird things out there that maybe weren't around 70 years ago
Mm.
when I was born. But but yeah, self self treatment can be very effective, but you want some oversight.
Yeah. Yeah. We think alike on that. But yeah, I mean, to your point, herbal medicine has been around for much, much longer than prescription drugs. And um, humans over time have really kind of figured out time tested approaches that work, and that is an accessible thing that I think one important thing that's like hard for people to wrap their minds around sometimes is it's not. I think we're kind of trained in this thinking that like the drug's always going to be like more effective, but with things like this, there's only a very few number of drugs that can even do anything against bacterial over, or like I would say like gut overgrowth or dysbiotic or pathogenic things in the gut, and um, they're often like too broad. So just a basic antibiotic that's going to also attack healthy gut bacteria, or they're just simply not targeted enough to where they're not going to zoom in on your specific thing. Whereas with herbal medicine, you have a lot more control and ability to manipulate the protocol so that it's targeted for the thing you need without being going against things that you don't need. And so it can actually be more effective than a medication, which I think is hard for people to kind of understand. But again, in the hands of a practitioner who has that experience to do that.
Yeah, the other thing about the natural treatment or self treatment is that you're at the same time as you're, let's say, coaching down the pathogen or unwanted overgrowth of whatever it is, you're coaching all of that down, but you're
Mm,
coaching up function. You want to take things that are nurturing, that will bring a lot of circulation and healing, especially to the gut. Circulation and healing is critical. You can't just
yeah,
kill everything and let the chips fall where they may.
right.
There's all the probiotic um, applications as well. So healing,
Yeah,
probiotic, crowding out the bad bacteria. If it's really nasty, you kind of need to know about it and chase that away, but you don't have to kill everything in the
yeah,
process.
yeah, absolutely. Well, Reed, we could talk all day, I can tell. We're very like minded. So it was really a pleasure to chat with you. I'm sure that people would just love to hear more about your training and everything that you have to offer. Do you mind just sharing a little bit more details about where they can connect with you?
Yes, sure. People interested in learning more should go to fdntraining.com/empowered nutrition. So FDN is what I call what we do functional diagnostic nutrition, FDN. And we train. So it's FDN training, fdntraining.com/empowered nutrition. and that'll get you right where you need to be.
Awesome. Thank you, Reed. And we'll put everything in the show notes so people can check that out, connect with you on social, and also just connect with you for some information that can kind of explain them with them a little bit more about your approach.
Thanks very much, Erin. We're happy to help anybody anytime. So love doing your podcast with you. Thank you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to have you. Take care, and we'll talk to you later.